What's good, y'all? It's Chanel, also known as Tuba Fresh, coming at you today with a little bit something different. I wanted to do something on the flugabone. I kind of wanted to pay tribute to the flugabone since it's been an instrument that I've loved for so long. And it's been something that's been, happening all around us. So many people, so many friends, so many colleagues are getting into the flugabone and using it in various different ways. And I really wanted to do something that kind of, talked about it. So I wanted to do this video called What is a Flugabone? Because oftentimes when I tell people that I know that maybe, aren't a brass musician, and I say, yeah, that instrument, that's called a flugabone, they're like, what? That sounds like a made up word. Are you serious, So I kind of wanted to do it for that, in that respect, but I also wanted to do it because so many of us are enjoying it and so many of us are playing it. And I thought that, for people that are interested in getting a flugabone, this would be a great video to watch. And people who already have a flugabone. I learned so much in doing this video, as you'll see, just the history of it. So I kind of wanted to give a video on the history of it. So I had the absolute pleasure of talking to my homie, Raymond James Mason, a trombone player in New York City. Well, actually, he's in Nashville now. He's in Tennessee. But he's all over the place. He's a touring musician. And I chose him because when I think about flugabone, I think about him because he's one of the people that, was one of the first few people that kind of started playing it that I knew of in New York City. So I reached out to him when I was thinking about getting a different flugabone. And I was like, hey, what do you know about flugabones? What do you recommend? And he just had this whole history, this whole knowledge, And I just thought to myself, if I'm going to do a video about flugabone, Ray Mason has to be the top guy in it because he knows so much. So you will definitely get a ton out of what Ray's saying here. And I just want to also point out that I also asked the homies Scott Sweeney of Sweeney Brass and Josh Landris of Josh Landris Brass in New York City and Sweeney Brass in Raleigh, North Carolina, to also talk about the flugabone, since they have been really the front runners of kind of like, customizing these horns and refurbishing them and just bringing them back to life. So stick around. You're going to hear from both of those guys. And thank you all so much for being part of it. I just want to mention a little bit about Ray Mason. I'm sure a lot of you already know him, but I'm going to be reading from my phone real quick. But Ray Mason, he's a trombone player primarily, but he is a multi-instrumentalist, as you'll find out. But he plays primarily trombone. He plays flugabone, the party horn. He plays tuba, he plays trumpet, saxophone. So he's a multi-instrumentalist, but let me read a little bit about him. He's from New York. He went to NYU to do classical, and then he did jazz studies. But the thing to know about him is that he's a touring musician, and he's the type of musician that plays on a lot of records. So after NYU, he went ahead and became part of the Brooklyn Afrobeat heavyweight Antibalas. You might know Antibalas. They just got nominated for a Grammy. And then he also became the in-house trombonist for Daptone Records and Dunham Records. So he did stuff with the late and great Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, the late Charles Bradley, Lee Fields, a ton of people. He also plays with Red Barat. He's also played with Erykah Badu, Alicia Keys, David Byrne. I mean, the list, Arcade Fire. I mean, the list goes on and on with Ray. He's been all over the world. He's been all over the country playing music, playing trombone in different situations. And he also has his own band, his own music. So he just released his record, I believe, in 2019 under his name, Raymond James Mason. And he's also doing another project. So he's like not only a touring musician, he's also doing his own music, which I love. So Ray is just an awesomely smart guy. He's really well versed in a ton of different kinds of history. And today I'm so happy for him to join me on this conversation. So here we go. What is a flugabone with Raymond James Mason? One of the reasons that I immediately thought of you as a person that if I'm doing something about the flugabone,
I gotta have Ray Mason on it. Is how I felt. Like, I was like, Ray's the first guy. When I was talking to Scott, I was like, talking to Scott, what instrument should I get? Which one? What do you think? And I was like, you know what? Let me talk to Ray, because Ray, he really knows his stuff. He's played the flugabone for years. I just see that you have a kind of know-how that a lot of people don't. And like me at the time, I was just kind of like playing the horn, but you had all this history and all this kind of like, you knew players that played it back in the day in the 70s or 80s or whatever, right? And you told me some players. So I kind of want to share with the people like me who are interested in the flugabone, that really enjoy playing it, but might not know so much about maybe kind of how it all began, where it comes from. Maybe you could tell us some of that kind of history. Maybe you could tell us like how it kind of influenced you, like who influenced you. I know Miwi, you talk about Miwi a lot, and he's one of the main guys that, in New York, that anyone really kind of saw playing like a not bass trombone, but like a bass trumpet or anything like that, like a marching horn in a situation that wasn't a brass band, right? So I kind of want you to talk about a few different things. And I think, if anything, I'll just jump in and ask you some questions. But I kind of wanted to get your perspective on flugabone culture right now, and kind of how all that started, how it began for you. Like, how did you come across the flugabone?
Yeah. Well, I think there's definitely a lot to unpack, and I'm really grateful that you reached out to me, Chanel. And I love talking about this stuff. This is my favorite instrument. And yeah, I call it the party horn because I call it the party horn because I would just bring it to parties. Originally, I this exact instrument used to belong to a great trombone player in New York named Nick Grinder, who plays on Broadway and big band stuff. And I first met Nick the first time I was going out to LA to perform, and I met Nick and his roommate Matt DiGiovanni, who's a great saxophone player and electronic musician, and they were studying in LA. I was crashing at their house because it was like a low budget kind of tour, and we didn't have hotels and stuff, and they were playing with us and offered for us to crash. And Nick had this horn in a case, and I was like, "What is that case that says like F.E. Olds on it?" And he was like, "Oh, it's like a valve trombone thing," and it was this big, like heavy, dense, like cubic, weird, awkward, but kind of like slanted, melted cube shape.
Yeah, I know
What,
exactly. Yeah.
what is that? And so I took it out, and I was like, and he was like, "Yeah, just take the trombone mouthpiece," and I played it, and I was like, "This is so cool."
What year was this?
This was I think 2011, or I think 2011-ish. And prior to that, my own experience was that, like, I studied trombone. I'm a trombonist. I studied trombone since I was 10 years old. When I was in high school doing marching band, I started playing tuba because we didn't have any tuba players. I would kind of mess with the baritones in the band room. My school district had like an old con bass trumpet that was like really worn and like beat up, but it was like, oh, trombone mouthpiece valves. And
Yeah.
I started getting into learning valves. But after high school, I stopped playing with valves. I dedicated myself to slide trombone, classical trombone playing for a couple of years. Then I kind of switched to studying more of jazz. And the timing really worked out in the sense of like I was really getting into Bob Brookmeyer and like Jerry Mulligan Quartet, like live at Storyville. And Bob Brookmeyer was an amazing arranger and valve trombonist. He played the valve trombone. He picked the valve trombone, like he picked one up in he played piano. He picked the valve trombone up in like Kansas City where he grew up, and then he ended up going to New York, blah, blah. He's playing all these bands, and he used to do all of these record dates in LA on valve trombone and New York, jingles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the producers couldn't even pick out that it was a valve trombone, because that's always a thing, is like
Yeah.
valve trombones are notoriously like hard to play in tune. They often need to have like extra like like valve pulls or like paddles to push out the tuning slides. So there's a lot of expensive modification work, and there wasn't really a precedent of many, like there was like Juan Teasel of the great Juan Teasel from Duke Ellington Orchestra, who composed Caravan, was a valve trombonist. There was a couple of valve trombone players in LA studio scene, like Bob Envoldson, who was also a tenor saxophone player.
Wow.
Like also was just like, I'm gonna pick up the trombone sound. But valves, in a way, if you're coming from the key work of a saxophone, especially the right hand of a saxophone, feels a lot like the valve, like the semitone changes. Like this is a whole, like the first valve on the sax is a whole step, and a half step. Anyway, but the point is there weren't that many valve trombone players in that context, and I took a liking to Bob's playing very much. So then when I met Nick and I saw this horn, I played it, I was like, this is the way to access Bob's playing. But that was 2011. Nick didn't sell me this Flugabone until 2013. And my I was on tour with Fela, the musical, off-Broadway musical, and I pretty much wanted to leave my trombone at the theater because we'd stay in a town for 2 weeks or a week or a month and play shows. Wanted to leave my trombone in the theater and have a horn in the hotel room just to practice on. So initially, this was more of like a practice tool for me because it's so easy to travel with. So Nick wasn't using this. He ended up selling it to me, and then I had it, and then I was just like, I love playing this instrument. And like the next step for me was I was in Japan with Antibalas, the Afrobeat band that I've been playing with the last 8 years. I was in Tokyo with Antibalas, and I went to the Tower Records, and they had this Japanese like imported CD, and it was like J.J. Johnson and Al Gray, the great Al Gray. J.J. Johnson, the preeminent bebop trombonist, Al Gray from the Count Basie Orchestra, amazing trombone player who used the plunger so well. And I bought this record, and then I started digging Al Gray more, and Al Gray played a lot of the King Flugabone, and there's like some videos of him playing it, and some jazz musicians, when they saw an instrument like this, they'd be like, oh, that's the Al Gray horn. Like they didn't even know what it was called. Like, oh, you're like, you're playing an Al Gray horn. Like that was I love that. And Al Gray was his trombone just like drenched, dripping character. So him using this horn was really cool to me. So anyway, so like that's kind of how I got more into the instrument, and then I wanted to learn more about it because I was like, and I started learning, this horn right now that I have. This is an F.E. Olds horn. These were actually called compact marching valve trombones. So the name kind of explains it. Like it's a marching valve trombone, but it's wrapped compactly. I would also say that besides Flugabone, this instrument is to me, the closest thing to it is a bass cornet.
Bass cornet.
That is what I would like, because and it kind of makes sense if you like look at the designs of cornets or the sounds of cornets. Like they're a little bit rounder, tightly wrapped. They have a little bit of a more mellow sound. They sound really great as solo instruments, and also like making cornets, like making like mellow pad layers and stuff like that. It's not as strident as a bass trumpet. Like bass trumpets were pretty much invented for like Wagner operas and stuff. Like that was like when it was starting, and that really was trying to get that a little bit more brighty,
sharp and
sharper sound of the trumpet down an octave, right? And these horns don't have that. They're a little bit more mellow, and they're shorter. They're like a bass. Like I hope to get another bass trumpet one day because I had a con bass trumpet. I ended up selling it for a trump because it was just, I wanted to get it overhauled, but Chuck McAlexander of the Brass Lab, which is not around anymore, he told me, he was like, it's a waste of time. It's like it's going to cost more money than the horn is worth.
Oh,
I wish he never told me that as a youngster, because if he had done it, then like years later, I could have probably like, it would have been an amazing horn. I could have sold it for thousands of dollars if I let Chuck McAlexander completely overhaul.
yeah.
But he told me it's not worth it. The casings are broken. He's like, you should just sell it.
Oh my God.
But these horns are anyway, so I'm trying to cover a lot of topics, but kind of going back to the horn is that so this is an old compact marching valve trombone, and to kind of break down more history is that the Olds company was started by Frank Ellsworth Olds, F.E. Olds, and he actually started he worked at Con in the really early days, like the turn of the 20th century, and then he moved to LA and started doing like electroplating work and little designs, and then he started making trombones, and then he had this crazy custom shop where they made all these crazy horns that had different alloys, all this stuff. So it was a shop that slowly built up and got more popular with professionals, especially in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And they started scaling up, and eventually they moved to Fullerton, California, outside of LA in like 1964. And shortly kind of got bought by a company, Chicago Music Instruments. And this is when the company kind of stopped going towards these weird, like they still made their flagship models of trombones and trumpets, but they started making more student instruments that were really well made and really like, and there's a lot of horns like the Olds Ambassador, there's Olds Ambassador cornets, trumpets, trombones, French horns that are student model instruments that were all made on the same tooling as the professional models, and they sound great. You can get an Olds Ambassador trumpet for $100. The valves are better than modern makers. Like this is the kind of stuff that was going on, but they started branching out into other instruments for schools and for high schools and junior highs, and in America, the marching band scene was like really intense in the 50s and 60s and 70s. A lot of school districts had great marching programs, and so a lot of marching instruments were getting made and were getting designed and tinkered with. So Olds came up with this. They came up with mellophones. They came up with valve trombones. They came up with tubas, and eventually the company got bought, and it kind of started eventually the company pretty much got bought and sold and bought and sold, and then it kind of went under. And the company that owned the Olds names and brands and the designs, they ended up licensing them to other makers in Indiana. So like Bach, Vincent Bach, the great like Stradivarius trumpets and trombones. They were making horns labeled Mercedes, and the Bach Mercedes instruments were kind of like intermediate. They're really good instruments. A lot of them were also made on the same professional mandrels like of Stradivarius, but they used more more cheaper cost, like brass for where you hold the instruments and stuff. And Bach started making all of these same horns that Olds made. It's the same design, the same blueprint, but they labeled them Bach Mercedes. So this is an Olds from Fullerton.
That's crazy.
But you can buy the same exact instrument, but it'll be stamped Bach Mercedes. It's the same.
Insane. So it's the same horn.
Yeah, and there's a couple little differences, like some of these braces, you might see some variations also because these horns were often used in school districts and beat up. So like repair people might, like a ring might fall off, or like this horn kind of had like a lyre holder or something, or like a thumb ring here. This was removed before I got it. So so you'll find that there's these little kind of differences. And then also this horn was made and stenciled under Blessing, and Blessing has been an instrument maker, instrument company in, I think it was like Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and then it went to Elkhart. It's kind of in that region, and you can still buy Blessing instruments. They're usually seen as like intermediate copies of professional cons and stuff, but Blessing also made this same exact design, but it says Blessing in it. And these were all marketed as like compact marching valve trombones. And then I believe, I'm not exactly sure of the date, but I think it might be the late 60s or early 70s. I've tried to find the exact dates, but I know that it was when this there was a designer at King named George McCracken, and he started working on more marching things, and he started working on some other stuff. Like he worked on a bass trombone for King that had 2 triggers, the dual Gravis bass trombone, which is a bass trombone that a lot of players that play jazz or big band or want like a really punchy, people love those old bass. McCracken started working on different weird instruments. He started working on cornets. He worked on different French horn designs, mellophones, and he designed a version of the compact marching valve trombone, which he called the Flugabone.
Hey, what's up, Chanel? We're here to talk about some Flugabones. So we are absolutely delighted that we get to work with musicians customizing, building, refurbishing, bringing their Flugabone dreams to life. We've been working with Flugabones for about 6+ years now, just really digging into them and pulling out every bit of creativity on them that we can. It's really our passion to be able to work with musicians to help them fulfill their visions, their artistic dreams into a Flugabone through brass and nickel silver. So we are very fortunate to be able to work with so many different people. We've done King 1130s, we've done the olds, we've done Bachs, we've done big marching baritones, we've done little like flugelhorn type things too, which I know is a little bit different, but it's still along the same lines. But Flugabone is something that we love. The Flugabone lifestyle, the Flugabone nation. It's such a fun horn, such a fun thing to take with you. The sound on them, they're great, they're compact. Trombone players love them, tuba players love them, trumpet players love them. It's a very accessible instrument, and it's something that you can really have fun with and get out there and make a big noise. Personally, I own a King 1130 Flugabone, which is one I actually keep here in the shop just to show potential customers and clients what a basic Flugabone looks like. We haven't really done too much custom work to it besides strip the lacquer and do a satin finish on it, and then a restoration on it as well. So that one we've kept pretty basic for myself, but we don't really keep any of the other ones basic. We go pretty wild on them. A lot of times artists will give me creative freedom on it, which is just a delight. We get to go nuts and make a fun horn out of it. And over the past 5 years, we've really seen the amount and quality of the Flugabone players and people and orders and everything just go out of this world. So we're super happy that we've been able to work with people customizing, building Flugabones, and we've been doing just a ton of other custom work too. We got refurbishing going on like crazy. We've got custom horns being built. We got sousaphone rebuilds over there and a tuba rebuild over there. So we're kind of up to our eyeballs in horns, and we absolutely love it. Thanks.
So that's where we first hear the name, is with King.
So that's where we first hear the name Flugabone, is when King made their own design, which is a little bit different. There's like a bend, like Chanel, you can show it more, but there's like there's that really cool bend. Yes. Yeah. Like that really kind of, there's all these really cool bends on the valve wrap. So that's when the name exactly.
Yeah.
I love that long curvy pipe that there's things that remind me of a cornet, shepherd's crooks, and these are kind of these three things that old cornets traditionally had, right? And but that's when it was, so the name Flugabone kind of harkens to like a flugelhorn / a trombone, which I
Right.
think is also kind of like, I think it's a good way to describe the King design versus this. Like this design for me is more of like a bass cornet.
Mm-hmm.
King design to me is more of a flugelhorn and a trombone. And
I feel you though, what you said as a bass cornet, because this is an alto cornet.
yeah,
And I feel like it's really compact, like your horn, like the Mercedes.
yeah,
And I feel like it makes total sense how you're describing your horn versus the Flugabone, because even if you look at these two, I mean, to compare, it's almost like it's less, the King is almost like more, it's a little bit less compact in that kind of tightness
yeah,
in the wrap.
yeah. And
Um,
there's definitely things about the bell flare, you know,
yes,
the flugabone to me looks more like a flugelhorn in the ways that the flare kind of goes out. And
yeah,
so, and I'm trying to remember like the bore of the King, because these horns are cool because the bore size is 515, which is a little bit bigger than a King 3B, which is a very popular jazz rock like horn section trombone.
hmm,
And it's a little smaller than a Bach 36, which is a medium bore like versatile classical jazz. It's in between
yeah,
a lot of valve trombones, the King valve trombones, and the Bach valve trombones, and the Kahn valve trombones. A lot of the bore is really small, like 495, like the King valve is like 495, like a King 2B, which is a very small bore instrument that some player, you know, like who plays 2Bs, like Adam Dotson or like
mhm,
Alex Wasili, they play 2Bs and sound amazing on them.
yeah,
A little too small for me. So playing into that stuffy valve trombone is tough, but these are a little bit broader
yeah,
bore. So that kind of allows you to put more air through the instrument, which I feel like is needed to do the micro tuning.
yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the thing is that like these instruments also like were not, these weren't like designed to go to like David Geffen Hall and play a recital. You know, like
Yeah.
they were meant for the field, like marching band and like, you know, and tuning outside and in the elements and things like that. Like tuning can vary, you know, and
Absolutely.
there's definitely tuning tendencies that I had to learn playing this instrument, but with the larger bore, it just gives me a little bit more room to play.
Room. Yes.
And I feel like that's really important to get the tuning right on these horns. And yeah, it's
Yeah. When I had that Chinese made horn, the tuning was just so hard. And I finally, it took me like a year or two to finally adjust to it. And then, but with the King, I just had like a fewer adjustments, and I feel like it's a lot easier to work with, a lot easier. It was you, Miwi, and I know also that you mentioned Charlie Rosen was doing Flugabone too, but really, and maybe a couple other trombone players that maybe found out about it through you. So maybe you could kind of talk about like the progression, right? Like from
yeah,
2013, like 2011, like how do you feel it has changed, and like why do you think it's changing? I'm just curious to how you feel about it kind of becoming like this underground phenomenon.
yeah, it's really it's kind of wild for me because you know, I kind of described the reasons that I got this instrument and got involved in it. And then also, yeah, like I started like subbing on some gigs with Red Barat, which is an amazing band. It's like Bhangra brass band. And Miwi La Lupa was playing bass trumpet, as he called it, in Red Barat. He was playing on one of these horns marked as Blessing, I'm pretty sure. So I started hearing him use the horn in that setting, and it was so cool because like Red Barat with like different Punjabi lines, and he could play with the soprano sax like and like Mimi was playing that on this horn like down an octave on some songs, and I thought that was so hip. I loved that. So I also saw John Natchez, who's a great composer who's based in LA now. He plays, he's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays in a band called The War on Drugs, which is an amazing band. And he plays saxophone and trumpet. And I saw him rocking one of these too. And he was using this for different gigs. And when they needed a trombone sound or recording, he does a lot of soundtrack composition. And so like Miwi and John were people that I saw using it in more contextual things that I was interested in, because at this point I wasn't necessarily trying to be in an orchestra, and I wasn't trying to be in a big band or put together a jazz group and go on tour with it. I was looking to different styles and things, and to see those players using the instrument in those other styles that I was interested in was like really exciting for me. I think there's also Andre Murchison, who's an amazing trombone player.
You told me about him.
He plays Duke Ellington Orchestra, and he comes from this lineage of really just like dripping with character trombone playing. And I saw him playing this horn, and I think I saw him refer to as Al Gray horn. So that was like another person that I heard mention Al Gray horn. And so seeing these players, that really excited me. And it was also like going on tour. It was just fun to have this, because when you're on tour with like a band, like with horns or something like that, like especially when you're younger and it's like a low budget tour, you might like end up playing a house party and your trombone slide might bang into somebody, but this is okay. I can throw it in a backpack and just go. I would bring it to jam sessions, because I would go to jam sessions and there'd be like 5 slide trombone players like waiting in line at the Jelly to like take a solo, and I'd be like, let me just bring like something different. And I don't have to like, I can just hold it on me. I don't have to like leave it under like a pile of coats in a club and hope that like no one jacks it. Like I can just hold it. I just hold it in my like in a jam sport, and it's like totally fine, you know. But I think around that time, for kind of separate reasons, Charlie discovered the Flugabone, because Charlie Rosen is an amazing, I keep saying amazing, but all of these musicians are truly like innovators. So it is apropos that to call them all amazing. But Charlie is a phenomenal composer and arranger and orchestrator for television and Broadway musicals, and he's also a multi-instrumentalist that can play like every instrument well. Like he's mainly a bass player, but he can play every instrument well. And I think in his need to learn different instruments to orchestrate on, I think he found it from an orchestration perspective. He could get around the saxophone, he could get around the trumpet a little bit, and I think he wanted to get the trombone sound in, but learning slide trombone and getting it clean is just like, it's one of those things where like,
it's hard.
So it's really hard. Like, I feel like my own opinion is that trombone is really easy if you want to just do if you want to just do like simple trombone stuff, or you're using like glissandi and like, or you know, kind of some like tailgate. Sometimes like trombone is called to do that still. So if you're just picking the horn up and doing that, it's fine. But if you're trying to do precise things, it takes so much time and dedication. But with valves, that kind of makes it easier. So I feel like Charlie got into a place where he could orchestrate trombone or low brass things with this instrument.
Mhm.
And that's how he kind of discovered it. And then shortly thereafter, Charlie was made the music director for this NBC variety show one summer called Maya and Marty. And he asked me to be in the band, like the house band for the show at NBC. And that was great because Charlie started, he was writing original pieces for this band to play, and it was an incredible band. Brian Carter on drums, Grace Kelly on saxophone, Benny Benack III on trumpet, Jared Scharf, who formerly of SNL, who's a great producer. He was playing guitar. Natalie Tenenbaum was playing piano, who worked on Mean Girl. Like, it was an all-star band, and Charlie was writing original music for this band, and he started writing stuff with Flugabone. He started and he started writing for me to play it. I was like a featured soloist for this one song on TV with like playing like French horn things. Like, so that was when like it was like okay, like now here's someone who's like really starting to orchestrate and use this instrument, and it's not just like throw it in a backpack and bring it to the jam sesh,
right?
You know, and it's not necessarily a novelty, and that was something for me that I was starting to discover because I started bringing this horn to sessions, and like I would, there's a artist named Curtis Harding who's like a great kind of soulful rock R&B kind of artist, and I played on his record Face Your Fear, and there's a song called On and On that had a lot of radio play, like alternative kind of radio. And I played this horn all over that song. Like,
really?
Yeah. So like I was in California in Whole Foods and the song came on and I was like,
isn't that the trippiest stuff?
I know.
You just randomly hear yourself on a record somewhere randomly.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's yeah, those are like surreal feelings, but I've had the fortune and privilege of playing trombone on other tracks that have gotten radio play, and that's always exciting. But I was most proud of the Curtis record because it was this horn that is like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there's kind of all of this convergence of me using the horn, recording for different ways. I could play mellow, I could do like rips, like a French horn, like you could put a lot of reverb on it. Like I played on a song, a cover of like I Can't Help Falling in Love, like Elvis made famous. I arranged horns on a cover of that Beck performed it, and I played like flourishing like Flugabone solos all throughout it. But like it's when you play it super softly and mellow with a lot of reverb, you can kind of get this like French horn in the distance, like Henry Mancini vibe.
Yes.
Which is so cool. But then you can like play it super loud and it can get like super crunchy, and you can play it loud and try to do like octave rips, and you can get closer to like a French horn thing. And French horn is just so hard to play. The mouthpiece is weird. The transposition takes time. The partials are so close together. Yeah. So for me, so I was kind of unlocking the recording secrets of this instrument, and Charlie was starting to orchestrate it. And he started getting Benny to play trumpet and Flugabone, and Benny got a King Flugabone, and then Charlie started writing music for new musicals and had the trumpet player double on Flugabone. So all of this kind of led to this like Flugabone culture, which was like this weird like joking like joke. I don't know, like we just like thought it was so funny. Because it was like Flugabone culture because like there was not many of us that were actually doing like trying to use it. So that's kind of where Flugabone culture came from, and then from there it really kind of, you know, just bringing the horn around, or like me posting videos, or like especially like if I have electronic music friends or DJs are like, yo, can you like rip a solo? Like getting behind a DJ booth with a trombone slide is like a pain in the ass. People do it. Like Alexander Lewis is great.
Yes,
But this horn is just like, you know, just put a mic in front of me, blah, blah, blah. Like we're good, you know? Yeah. And so so, and then people just started like picking them up and really real. And it's funny because I think a lot about from like when Chuck at the Brass Lab told me not to overhaul that to
To now.
Sweeney telling me it's going to cost more. Like I've probably spent like 5 times as much money than I paid for this instrument on modifications and repairs to it. But for me, it's like, it's all about love. It's like, it's love. And I really think about how like almost 10 years ago, people were like, these are just like disaster instruments that are novelty and fun, but people are really finding uses for them, whether it's a trumpet player doubling, whether it's a tuba player doubling, whether it's a trombone player that wants to develop their valves skills, so
and so
really
many people are writing for it now, even if in their own way, in their own bands or whatever. And I think, like you said, I mean, you rarely hear records with it. A couple like people have fortunate to put it down on record like you have, and maybe a couple other people, but you rarely hear records with it. And it's something that I feel like is just now kind of catching on in this brass world that we live in. It's becoming so much more to so many more people, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's I don't know. It's funny because I wonder like what the future. I don't know. I feel like I feel like this is an instrument that like every brass musician should have like in their closet. Like it's one of those things where like I have trombones that I think like one trombone, like that trombone, I feel like every trombone player should have a Bach 36 because it's in the middle and it has a trigger and you can bring it to a session and play low and play high, and everyone should just have one just in case. And then for like all brass musicians, I think everyone should have this.
Hi, I'm Josh Landris, owner of J. Landris Brass in New York City. Thank you, Chanel, for having me be a part of this today. Here we are to talk a little bit about flugabones and flugabone culture. As some of you may know, flugabones and the compact marching valve trombone are making a comeback and very popular again with musicians. And I think it's really something that shows an age of our time. Right now, with everything that's going on in this country, we have a lot of people who are taking to the streets and protesting and standing up for what's right and what they believe in. And I really feel that the flugabone is one of those instruments that allows people to do that outside. It can be loud and noisy and funky, and it can be sweet and soft and buttery. And it's just one of those things that really speaks to people this day and age. You take it out to a street, you're playing in a brass band, concerts aren't happening indoors, there's not indoor gigs. And it's a way that a low brass player can really have a good time, play something a little bit funkier. It's a little bit easier to carry around and make a lot of noise. I think they're really great. My favorite flugabone is the actual real King flugabone. That is the only instrument that actually has the name flugabone. All the others are a version of a marching baritone or a compact marching valve trombone. But the flugabone, I find itself is really a very attractive instrument. It's got some really nice bends to it. And it plays very, very well. Also having the larger bell flare on it really gives it some really cool colors and sounds. In the past couple years, really business has picked up on them, whereas, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, not many people had them or even thought about playing them. Nowadays, I can't keep them in stock in my store. We've probably gone through a dozen in the past couple weeks that we've fixed up and converted and made nice for people. And they're just great. We're even now doing some conversions on mellophones to convert those to trombones, or fit a trombone mouthpiece in the receiver and the lead pipe, and we're calling those mellobones. And they're just as fun, not as big and loud, but a little bit softer and a little bit more intimate. But this whole flugabone culture is really awesome, and I think it's great that people are playing music outside and more people are getting involved. So thank you, Chanel, for having me be a part of this today. All the best.
Like that's kind of, and I feel like it's kind of getting to that point, and I'm really excited to see like like Reggie Chapman has his band Bone Apple Tea, which I've played a couple of gigs.
All valves.
And it's all based on instruments, valve instruments. Most of the group is playing these horns, and there's a couple people that might bring in a baritone or a con valve trombone, or Reggie has a bass trumpet that BAC made for him. So you have these ensembles that are Reggie's writing for all of these instruments, and I think also
kind of like the gravity of Flugabone.
Right. I know. It's kind of like the gravity of Flugabone, which is super hip. And I'm also excited at all of the people that are kind of customizing them or trying to optimize them, like Scott Sweeney and
the four valve one
The 4-valve one is crazy. I feel like that's really heavy, but
I feel like it's really heavy, and I wonder if it adjusts the compensation of
right. I feel like it must be non-compensating. Like that's, and I feel like I already have enough tuning tendency issues on these horns to but that's what I'm into, this innovation, because maybe for a tuba player that is used to playing 4 valves, that's what they're down with, and different, I got the horn. So Scott Sweeney overhauled the horn for me, and I had it for about I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years as he modified it. And then eventually the horn just got beat up. It was in a backpack and it got beat up and blah blah blah. Years later, I was jumping in pools with it. I was jumping in the ocean in Thailand with it. I was hanging. I was just running around Austin, Texas during South by Southwest. I met Jermaine Dupri, and I had this in my hand, and I started playing with the DJ, and he was like, "That horn's really cool," and I was like, "Oh, it's a Flugabone." I'm like, "Yeah, you got to cut this on your records, bro. This is the sound,
real party horn for real.
Party horn. I put stickers on it, glow in the dark confetti stickers for a music video with the band I was playing with at the time, all of these kind of different things, and then eventually it got beat up a lot, and I brought it to Josh Landris, and he gave it an overhaul, and then he made it a screw bell. And
the screw bell changes it, right? It changes the whole vibe.
The screw bell is a different vibe, and I like how it plays better with the screw bell. It kind of gives it a little bit more projection. It kind of makes it a little bit less mellow, and I do think the weight of the ring, it takes a little bit more effort, but it's not. So because of the large bore, it doesn't feel that bad for me. And I like the trade-off of having a little bit more. This mass kind of lets it project a little bit more, And then also I started putting it in a flat case with my trumpet and with my OP1.
I saw that. That's dope. Everything fits so nicely in that case.
Yeah, exactly. So and I've taken that case everywhere. I've taken it on tours. I've taken it to Southeast Asia, vacations, I just bring it and it's and with a trombone gig bag, I can show up to a session with, or a writing session with that flat case and with my trombone, and I'm good. I got all, and I'll go to sessions where I'm writing horn parts or I'm writing things, and I'll play this. I'll have this instrument in the booth, and I'll be working. I'll be writing ideas, or in the control room, I'll be writing ideas on this instrument, because for me, it's become such a great creative tool to get ideas out faster.
Yes.
Or to I have to think of a trumpet thing, and you can. It's the.
I feel
players play this, so it's just
I feel like it's a perfect middle instrument to kind of what you said. You can get ideas for trumpet with it too, because you're kind of gonna know how trumpet can play the line. And then for me as a tuba player, it changed my whole perspective on brass playing, because I could get into my bed and play. I could be on the couch. I could be anywhere, and it changed my whole appreciation. Because tuba, honestly, is just sucks to take that thing out. And it's like, so Flugabone changed my whole life because I could practice sousaphone lines with it, and it was perfect. I could, I mean, I didn't even need to pick up my sousaphone until I'm ready to go to the gig because I could practice it on the Flugabone. And I think it for that thing, it was totally life changing. And I think, yeah, like writing on it, I take it up in my lessons, and I'm like, oh, here's a note, or I take it up to just like, what is this person playing? Because sometimes when I'm playing keyboard, like to get to transpose, or I mean to transcribe like a vocal, it's like a little bit harder, right, to kind of get the vocal lines, but or like the way that they play, the way that they're singing. And I think the Flugabone, I can just kind of easily get it, like how they're really singing it, which is like on tuba, it's kind of like, yeah, it's
Right.
like you really have to finesse it on the tuba,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean. So it's like a nice in between, a nice middle ground for a bunch of things.
Yeah, exactly. And that, you know, I don't know as well as you about like carrying the tuba and all the things, but as a trombonist, like having this instrument over your shoulder, you can't lay down. It's hard to like lay on the couch. And I've definitely had moments where I'm just like watching something with subtitles on Netflix, and I'm just like,
I see you like lay on your couch like this, like playing, watching, and I'm like, yeah, that's to
yeah,
keep us going, doing this thing, playing horns. That's what we kind of need sometimes.
I know. I think so too. And especially during this time, because like during COVID, like for a lot of musicians, there's a lot of like ups and downs and uncertainty right now. And like for every day that I have like an efficient, productive time, whether it's composing music or practicing, I have a day where I'm like, oh man, like what is,
Absolutely.
and sometimes when I'm feeling like that, like I just need to pick up this horn and like lay down the couch and go through modes or something, like something that goes against every teacher's advice for technique and posture, but like I'm playing, and this, and yeah, it's just such there's just so many ways to express yourself on this horn. And then like you can get into pedals and stuff. I've been composing music with just this and effects pedals because I can run this with an octave pedal
Right.
and EQ, and it sounds like a trumpet.
Yeah.
And I can run it down an octave or two. And with the valves, it sounds like a tuba, and that's so cool for me to be able to, like, I have a trumpet and I have a tuba and I'll record them, but especially in writing, like if I try to
quickly
get things out quickly. If I try to write on a trumpet, I get tired in 15 minutes and I can't play anymore. Or if I try writing on tuba, I get winded after like 20 minutes and I'm like, I can't breathe. I'm so hyperventilating from slow, like air. But this is like, it's just nimble, blah, blah, blah. And I also use it, like I'll like tuck it in if I like recording sessions, I'll tuck it in as like another layer that's kind of low, that kind of gives like a roundness, like I'll record trombone parts, but I'll record a track where this is just in unison and just a little ducked a little bit lower. Yeah. And there's something about the little bit more mellowness of this, and also the valve motions, that if you like have everything lined up, it kind of gives a new dimension to the trombone track. And there's also precedent of, I like Stax Records had like the Memphis horns played on a bunch of Stax records. They're like famous. And like Wayne Jackson, the late Wayne Jackson, who played trumpet on all the Otis Redding stuff. And anyway, he would record valve trombone on stuff that was, but it would be super, but he wasn't like a virtuosic valve trombonist, but that little mellowness that he would kind of get it in there, and they would tuck it super low in the mix. So it's like barely audible, but it's a feeling that, if you listen closely to some Otis Redding or like Try a Little Tenderness, even, like you can hear this valve trombone vibe on it. And I really like adding this as like another layer when I'm doing horn arrangements. So that's just another example. And especially for people that or a trumpet player that might want to do stuff like that, and they want to have like a little mellow
Yeah.
there tucked in. So that's just like one specific example of many that I use this instrument. And I think that more people are gonna, I wonder if there's gonna be a supply shortage, because these are like used instruments, and like I really feel like there needs to be someone that is making them,
Creating them now.
yeah, creating them fresh. And like that, I would love if like Adams made one, like that would be, because they make great instruments.
Are those the ones, the people that make Christian Scott's horns?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So they're kind of already, they're making, I read somewhere that Christian Scott's horns, those horns are called like fluga, some like what, it has this weird name to it. It's
Yeah, like reverse flugelhorn or like
something like that. And it reminded me of Flugabone. Like Flummel or something. Flummel, I don't fucking know.
like, yeah, there's like Flumpet and
Flumpet. That's what it was.
Flumpet, which is, yeah, so that's, we're getting into these kind of like nuances of timbre that are like very subtle. And I think like, you know, we're in this spectrum of like flugelhorn, cornet,
yeah,
Flumpet, like
that has to be like the worst name I've heard.
I know, yeah, I know. It's just,
I mean, Flugabone's pretty bad, but
yeah,
Flumpet is like pretty awful.
I know.
I
think that's why I call it,
that would be dope.
I called a party horn because compact marching valve trombone is just too long, and Flugabone, technically my instrument is not a Flugabone.
Right, exactly.
So I felt like, but I also will just say Flugabone because it's just easier.
Especially for people who know what it is.
Yeah. And then people spell it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The king is like flug a bone, and people write like flug el, or sometimes I see it with the two dots, the umlaut, like flugo, like whatever. And I'm like,
yeah.
party horn.
Party horn is easy, and I've had a lot of people just have named the Flugabone that I played party horn. I'm like, yeah, this is from Raymond Mason, and this is what, it's funny because people all over the country, whether we realize it or not or see it or not, they've been influenced by it, and they hear kind of like a mix of like what it's all called. And I think that's really cool, and I think that's really interesting. I mean, who knows? Do you think the trend is gonna fall off at some point? Do you think it's gonna keep on going? I mean, who knows, right? But
yeah, it's, I mean, I think brass musicians are really, the roles of musicians are changing, and we all recognize that. And we're all, and I'm not certain of the way things are going to go, but it seems like the industry is kind of streamlining, and we're having to learn more skills and be more versatile. And you know, it's getting harder and harder to just to just be like, I play trombone for a living, or like I just play tuba for a living. Like our jobs are becoming so much more, and we're like,
it's impossible to make a living off of just that, and especially just one genre too. So like people like you, people like Todd Simon, people like Nadav, or you know, people like Reggie, who come from classical background and were able to successfully put in pop and jazz into their repertoire. I think, you know, if I could go back in time, that's one thing I would want to learn from earlier ages is contemporary music. And if one thing I would tell my students or tell younger players is learn all kinds of genres, learn everything. Music is music, and don't get stuck into one thing, right? Same thing goes for the jazz folks, you know, learn classical, learn foundation work, you know, and then of course, do all the things that you're, you know, DJing, you know, writing records, producing, arranging. I mean, it just, unfortunately in some way, I think fortunately, I love learning. And I think that's one of the fun parts about all of us, we love being musicians, is because we're constantly growing, right? And we constantly have this, like, you know, no ceiling to go towards. So I think it's kind of fun to learn all that stuff. And I think it just takes like feeling like you can, and getting the know-how, the tools to really be able to do it, right?
I think
you're right.
I think more people will get into these instruments in search of that versatility, or in search of the right tools that will help them be opened up to more opportunities. I feel like, and for all of the reasons we've discussed, whether it's a tuba player that wants a trombone like sound, or a trumpet player that wants a trombone like sound, or a trombone player that wants valves, like it's this horn is a really simple way to access those things and to have them as an option. And that's kind of, the versatile musician needs to be open to all options and opportunities, and have the right tools to execute at a high level all of those various options and opportunities. So this instrument helps with that, and I'm really happy that people have been discovering it more and are more interested in using it. I know, like, it's and I'm seeing people use it in its intended form, going to protests, important protests, that that when music is asked by the organizers, these are the instruments, because during COVID or trombone slide, like, they're not getting in the way. You can kind of contain them and hold them.
Yeah.
So for me, that was really beautiful. Besides the creative usages of this instrument, was for me to see them being used as they were originally intended, for like marching and outdoors, but with a way more meaningful context, performing Black American music.
Absolutely.
So for me, seeing these instruments out in that context, that also gave me hope that, like, it's not just a novelty.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Wow, thank you so much, Ray. I mean, I feel like the knowledge you have on this is like amazing. I mean, the way that this is, I don't know if this is going to be included, but the way that you went from FBOs into Mercedes, I mean, into the King, that was just beautiful. And thank you so much. I mean, you're so knowledgeable about this stuff, and I think a lot of people are going to get great stuff from this. And I mean, it's great to talk to you again. It's been a while.
I know. And I'm sorry if I went off on tangents.
It's great.
I get so my tuba is actually a Bach Mercedes that is
really
rip off. The Olds made a little 4-valve B flat that was very similar to the Con 4J, which is like the precursor to the 5J, and Olds made one of I think it was called like the 088 or something. And then Bach, just like they took the blueprint for this, they took the blueprint for the tuba. So that's my tuba, which is,
so you have like multiple connections to it too. Like,
yeah. And I think me learning about the history kind of like it also revealed to me like the instruments that are maybe like sleeper instruments that I can get for cheap, but also are really good. Just for like learning and stuff like that. So I kind of like it because it has a giant you can't really see it, but it has like a giant Vincent Bach engraving on it, which is like hilarious. Like they don't make tubas at all, but like there was a period where they were, and like so that's kind of it. But yeah, I loved talking about this, and I'm really glad that we got to talk about one of my favorite things. This is truly my favorite instrument I own, and like, if I was forced in an unpleasant situation of picking this over a slide trombone, I'd probably pick this. If I could only play one the rest of my life, I'd probably pick this instrument. And if Bob Brookmeyer could do sessions and no one could tell that it was a valved trombone, then like, I think that's a goal to work towards. Maybe who knows? Maybe people will start using these in more I don't know, maybe a serious, I don't know, like I not serious, I'm trying to find the word, but it keep expanding the content.
Expand the horizons of it, I mean, I think this horn, this alto cornet I think it's a perfect jazz solo instrument. Perfect.
Yeah.
And I don't play jazz, well, but when I was playing it, I was like, this sound is like, it reminded me of like jazz players when they play the flugelhorn, but I
Yeah,
think it has way more character.
there's a trombone player. I think his name is Scott Reeves, and he plays like alto flugelhorn, and it's like very similar to the. And before I go too, let me just grab one more instrument, and then we
Yeah.
can,
Okay, cool. Let me see what it is.
because I've talked about this instrument to people, but like,
Oh, is it? Yeah. Okay. I think people need to know what this is. And wait, what key is it? Is you said it's in D?
so this man, it's so dark. It's like the sun has gone down, so it's
Right.
like dark now.
Yeah.
But this is a ballad horn, and this one was made around like 1874, and I got it off eBay. And the engraving is
Wow. Look
amazing
at that
on it.
engraving. Amazing. New
Yeah,
York.
I know. And it's like, and even like the little details on the like
Oh shit!
side.
It's like a French horn. It's like a F2
Yeah.
in a way. French
Yeah,
horn.
and these horns this is like kind of like a flugel French horn. These instruments were made to leave like by the piano in your parlor. So like if you're having a party, it's a Victorian party, someone can get on the piano and play like Auld Lang Syne or something, and then you could just grab this horn and read the piano music and have like the horn playing the melody.
Wow.
And they had different crooks to kind of change the key, and the mouthpiece is really messed up. And
Can you play a little bit of so we can hear what that sounds like?
So when a trombone mouthpiece fits in mine, but then it goes in the key of like D flat, which is a transposition nightmare. But once you get used to it, it's like kind of soulful. Like it's like I don't know. I haven't played it.
Wow, that's dope. Yeah, that has a sweet sound, man. Sound like Vincent Chauncey over there.
So yeah, I just
great.
Yeah, it's a cool. I like playing it. I like it's more mellow than the Flugabone, so it's like really cool as if I record it in harmony, or like I'll do chords where like there's a common tone throughout the chord, and then like and then the other parts are moving, and then you mix it and it sounds like a really soft synth pad, like it's like trippy, like just
that's dope. Yeah, it's really unusual.
Yeah,
it's really unusual. It sounds beautiful. It sings.
I got this a couple of years ago, and for the first year I tried playing it with its original mouthpiece, and it was just like sounded not good. And then I've gotten to put it on a couple records, but there's some records coming out that I put this on. But I'm alto cornets and ballad horns. There's like a whole world of these like intermediate brass instruments that some players really love to utilize for brass players. Love to utilize for palette,
and for texture. Yes.
So
I've been super into that, like that texture stuff now and palette now, like collecting these horns. It's just been changing my whole thoughts on composition, and it's just really nice to like play it yourself, and if you need to like send it to someone else that could really play whatever, but it's nice to just kind of put it in there, like we were talking about this a few months back about that, just being able to do that yourself is like really nice and satisfying in some way,
totally. It feels good to and also it kind of helps you understand, it kind of informs your writing. I think like with going back to like Charlie Rosen, like him learning all of the instruments that he writes for, it allows him to have a closer relationship to them and allows him to write more intimately for those instruments and really understand how they work on a deep level. And and I think that while it's not necessarily like if I just bought a French horn and learned French horn, I think some of these interesting instruments allow you to access certain colors in the palette of those instruments. And so you kind of, I've learned things about writing for this instrument that help inform to me, like if I were to write for French horn, or there's like one thing I had to write for French horn recently, and based on playing this instrument, I knew like I had a better understanding of what would really work on French horn and like what wouldn't necessarily. There's things I've recorded on this that I wanted it to be a French horn sounding thing, and then I listened back and I'm like, you know what, that should just be a trombone thing. Like that should just like it should just be like a soft trombone doing a little bit of accent. It's not a French horn thing. I thought it was. I've learned. So it kind of helps me kind of learn about arranging, like a hands-on arranging. So that's really cool. I don't think these horns are gonna come back anytime soon.
Nah, people don't want to put up with the transposing probably, and they do seem pretty rare too. I mean,
yeah,
but
definitely.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, but if I bring this horn out, everything is gonna be I gotta call it in D flat, because then it's like D flat.
Calling all the charts. I'm calling all the songs today, y'all.
Yeah, everything's in D flat today.
Yeah. Anyway. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful horn.
Thank you all so much for watching. This was an absolute pleasure to do. We're going to be doing more videos like this. Pretty soon, I think in mid-March, I'm going to announce a new series on the channel, which I'm really excited about and I've been working hard on. And so I'm excited to bring that to y'all. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. It helps the channel. And thanks again. See you next time. Peace.